People with multiple quirks used to be a really rare thing in My Hero Academia, but as this series progresses, they seem to be appearing much more frequently. When I first began YouTube, I made a video ranking the 8 best multiple quirk users at the time, so today I thought I'd do an updated and more accurate version to set the record straight. Just before we get into this epic list, there are 2 brand new original episodes of My Hero Academia coming to Crunchyroll on the 15th of August, which, if I've uploaded this on the right day, then that should be today. If you go to crunchyroll.com/turtlequirk, you'll get a 2-week free trial of Crunchyroll's premium service where you can watch both of these episodes for free with no ads and in 1080p quality. The episodes are not part of Season 5, but rather it's just something to kind of hold us over until Season 5 comes out. I'd also recommend signing up to the free trial because, Crunchyroll have the biggest library of anime and drama titles that you're gonna find. I recently used their service to catch up on the first season of Dr. Stone, and if you saw my Q&A the other week, you'll know this was the first anime to ever make me cry real tears. I'd 10 billion% recommend it. I'm also using Crunchyroll to catch up on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, though I'm currently on part 3, so no spoilers in the comments for that, guys. New episodes of your favorite anime always get uploaded to Crunchyroll within literally a couple of hours of airing in Japan. This was the case for My Hero Season 4, and will obviously be the case for Season 5 as well, so do bear that in mind as well. There are just so many benefits. Massive thanks to them for sponsoring this video, and remember, go to crunchyroll.com/turtlequirk to check out those episodes for free, link in the description and my pinned comment. Okay, so starting at 8th place, we have a guy called Wolfram, who was the main antagonist of the first My Hero movie. This guy had 2 quirks in total, one of which was given to him by All For One. However, before we get into that, I think it's best to talk about his natural power, which was metal manipulation. This quirk functions in a similar way to Cementos, and basically Wolfram can manipulate any metal he makes contact with, which he primarily uses to generate barriers to protect himself or metallic pillars in which to crush his enemies. That said, whilst he usually needs to make contact with the metal, we saw that once he used this quirk amplification device, the power allowed him to draw metal towards him and manipulate it without even touching it. He was also able to restrain and hold back All Might with this power up, although admittedly this wasn't prime All Might, but still, it was a big feat nevertheless. The villain name Wolfram is a reference to his quirk, as in German it means tungsten, which until I watched Dr. Stone, I didn't realize tungsten was the strongest metal on Earth, but you learn something new every day. Wolfram's second quirk is muscle augmentation, which allowed him to vastly increase his muscle size until he was just glowing with strength. This one let him deal serious damage to the symbol of peace from close range, which is the reason AFO gave it to him. Overall, I'd say Wolfram is a pretty strong character in this universe, but without the help of the quirk amplification device, I wouldn't really have him near the top tier, but he's still ranked pretty well. For this list, however, he comes in last place. Moving on to 7th, we have a character from the Vigilante spin-off manga known as Number 6, or as he likes to call himself, the high-speed hero Overclock 2. Do not let the name fool you though, he's still very much a villain who has killed and tried to kill his fair share of professional heroes. He firstly has a quirk that allows him to detonate his body parts at will, delivering powerful explosions and then regenerating almost immediately. We saw in recent chapters how he chased the main character of Vigilantes down the street, and his knuckles began to expand in this panel before giving a punch that narrowly missed. Just look at the damage that was done from this punch in the background, it's unreal stuff. He exploded his own fist. As you would expect, his entire wrist and hand was destroyed in the process, but it grew back just a few seconds later. Such is the greatness of this ability. If you read Vigilantes, then you know what I'm about to say, but there's another quirk he has that he uses even more frequently, and it's known as overclock. I've explained the overclock quirk a couple of times on this channel already, so to summarize it in one sentence for those of you who haven't seen my previous videos, Number 6 fast. This guy in general is pretty nuts, and he's a puppet of All For One. We don't know the full backstory yet, but the implication is that he's some kind of prototype Nomu with a good level of intelligence. Now, before we get into the next part of this list, I'm going to warn you, there are big spoilers from this point forward, so if you want to avoid heavy spoilers for My Hero Academia Season 5, then consider this your warning to just pause the video and check out something else on the channel. Ranked in 6th place, we have the protagonist of My Hero Academia and the future symbol of peace, Deku. I wish I could have placed him higher on the list, I really do, but being as objective as I can, in his current level in the manga, he's not beating anyone in the remaining spots, at least not in a 1v1 fight. As we all know, Deku has the One For All quirk, which was passed down to him from All Might. Currently, he can use it comfortably at about 30%, and at a push he can go up to 45% temporarily. This enables him to move at lightning fast speeds and generate incredible power with his various arsenal of smashes. On occasion he's been known to tap into 100%, though this is not something that he can just do whenever he wants, especially as his arms have now just been totally wrecked up until this point. As far as Deku's multiple quirks go, we're currently only aware of 2 of them. The nature of One For All meant that, as it was being passed on from person to person, it stored the quirks of each user within its core. We discovered during the joint training arc that Deku is the first user of One For All to gain access to all of the various abilities, one of which is called blackwhip. This was a quirk originally possessed by the 5th holder, who was a hero known as Lariat. As you can see, the power does live up to its name, as the user can generate a bunch of black whips from their hand, which is useful for maneuvering in the air, as well as capturing opponents, dragging heavy objects, and much more. Black Whip, and every other quirk inside One For All, has been building up in strength alongside One For All itself, so Deku essentially has the best version of Black Whip that there has ever been. His other additional quirk is known as Float, although as of recording this video we've not yet seen him ever use this power. What we do know is that it's the quirk of the 7th user, Nana Shimura, who is of course All Might's master and the grandmother of Shigaraki, so there's a lot going on there. I hope we get a good look at this power before the war arc is over, but for now all we can assume is that it just makes you float in the air. Now, in 5th place we have 9, who was the main villain of the Heroes Rising movie. He is officially canon as we see him in the manga during My Villain Academia, so whether or not you think the movie is canon or not, 9 himself definitely is. Unlike Wolfram, however, this movie villain does not live up to his name, as instead of having 9 quirks, which is what his name would suggest, he has around 6 or 7, and there's a bit of confusion on this point. His original quirk was weather manipulation, which he used to great effect in the movie to electrocute Deku and Bakugo, not to mention creating a flame tornado during the final battle. This power let him control the weather as you'd expect, so naturally he can make it rain and create storms if he chooses to. 9's second quirk is a copy of All For One, which as you all know allows him to both steal quirks and transfer quirks at will. For those that haven't seen the movie, when 9 scanned people, he'd be able to ascertain their exact quirk. For example, when he encountered Katsuma, he knew the boy had a cell activation quirk for type B blood. The editor's words imply that this is a part of All For One alongside the ability to steal and transfer quirks, but I'm personally not sure if this translation is 100% accurate. I say that because, as it says in the manga, AFO didn't even know that his own feeble brother had a quirk. So yeah, just much to think about, but as you can see, that is why it's unclear if this is actually part of AFO or if it was just a separate quirk. 9 also has a barrier quirk that he used quite a few times during the movie, and it could withstand attacks from Deku at around 20% of One For All. These barriers could be layered on top of each other to provide even stronger defense, and in fact, during the climax of the movie he made a barrier with 6 layers, but that still wasn't enough to stop 2 users of One For All, of course. In normal circumstances, he can use the barriers not just to repel people like he did here, but also to blow them away. Another quirk of his involves summoning these 2 dragons from his back, which move according to his will. Not much else to say other than it's good to have a dragon army on your side, and he mainly used them to restrain his opponents. 9's laser quirk was actually the first one that we saw when the very first trailer for this movie came out. It can slice through houses, and if the anime wanted to go dark, he would have obviously been able to one-shot someone with this, but he didn't do so, but he could have done. Last but not least, well, no, actually this is the least effective quirk. He has cell activation, but the thing is, it doesn't actually work on his own body. This cell activation quirk was stolen from Katsuma's father, and the person who has it can activate their cells or someone else's cells, allowing for quick regeneration. The problem is that in 9's case, the quirk doesn't actually work on his type of blood, which is type B. So what that means is that for 9 specifically, the quirk is a complete dud. From Heroes Rising, it was clear that 9 was stronger than both Deku and Bakugo individually, at least at that point in the timeline. But the power of friendship, One For All, was more than enough to deal with him in the end. Oh, and Shigaraki made sure to decay him for good measure. Next up, we have the higher Nomu known as Hood, who is pretty much what I see in the corner of my room whenever I have sleep paralysis. This Nomu was made from the corpse of an underground street fighter, and he's the only high-end we've seen use its full potential, given that the others we've seen didn't really have much time to stabilize. His first quirk is of course super regeneration, which he used to reform his entire body when only his head remained. However, perhaps his most unique power was his transforming arms, which did a ton of damage during the end of season 4. With this ability, he can manipulate the size of his arms and stretch them to ridiculous lengths and even split them into multiple parts, as we can see here. When combined with his muscular enhancement quirk, this was used to slice a skyscraper into 2 parts, which is utterly insane. He also has shoulder mounted jets that allow him to fly, and who would forget the storage quirk that allowed him to harbour several Nomus within himself and then just release them onto the city below. Hood is one of the strongest things we've seen in this series so far, all thanks to the genius of Dr. Garaki. Taking the bronze medal on this list is everyone's favourite Hulk, Gigantomachia. Machia was All For One's loyal bodyguard over the years, and he has a naturally durable body, which meant that he could handle multiple quirks without getting remodeled by Dr. Garaki. Just to clarify this though, because I know just from reading comments on a previous video, many people misinterpreted what Dr. Garaki said here. What the doctor is saying is that Machia was given multiple quirks, it's just that his body didn't have to be altered in some way to handle them. I seriously had people like trying to argue with me that he didn't have multiple quirks one time, and every comment I read, my mind was just like this. In one of the more recent chapters in the manga, Dabi, full on confirms this, and he says that Giganto has a quirk that transforms morale into physical energy, which is perfect for someone who is just so enthusiastic about Shigaraki and All For One. With this power, he has a really incredible energy supply, which is why he can fight for an impressive 48 hours straight. Machia's body literally grows in battle, which is why he appears significantly larger in recent chapters of the War Arc than he did when Mina first encountered him a couple years back, and in fact he even looks bigger than he did at the start of My Villain Academia. Additionally, he has another quirk that renders him impervious to feeling pain, and a ton more that just help him last on the battlefield. This is of course without mentioning his super senses, which allow him to smell Shigaraki and track him down, seemingly regardless of how far away he is. There are a bunch of other miscellaneous abilities related to his body, such as his powerful breath, his natural durability, and his crazy speed, especially for someone of his size. Ultimately, the guy is just a beast, and he would do anything to protect the next character on this list. The silver medal goes to the original symbol of evil, and a guy who I estimate is between 130 to 200 years old, All For One. I'm gonna say straight up that we have no idea how many quirks this guy has cycled throughout the years, so I'm judging him based on what we've seen. Naturally, his original quirk is All For One, which we already know what it does, so no need to talk about that. A different quirk that you might not know he has if you don't read the manga is Life Force. So this doubles his lifespan and causes him to age at a much slower rate. This is how he's been able to survive since pretty much the first generation of quirk users, all the way up to present day society in My Hero Academia. Life Force does have a drawback though, which is that the user sacrifices their physical ability and their athleticism. However, we saw during the anime that All For One has several strength enhancing and strength multiplying quirks, which likely override this drawback. A younger All For One also possessed a quirk that let him nuke an entire island, which is how he was able to kill All Might's master, Nana Shimura. As we've seen, he also has a warping quirk that lets him transfer people to and from his location, or to the location of someone he's familiar with, but as he said, he does need more practice with this quirk. Perhaps one of his most impressive abilities is Air Cannon. So this produces a really powerful shockwave, and when it's combined with quirks like spring-like limbs, it was enough to completely wreck the surrounding environment during the big battle. Look how it changes the landscape in this moment, from this to this, like that's pretty damn powerful. Forcible quirk activation is another favourite of his, and it lives up to its name pretty well by activating the quirk of whoever it stabs and allowing All For One to control that quirk. This was best seen when All For One used it on Kurogiri and then created portals based on his own desires. So this kind of shows us that when All For One uses this quirk, he's basically using people as a puppet when he does this. The tendrils from the quirk can also be used to strike other people and just throw them around, as we see in this hilarious clip. As if all that wasn't enough, he has another quirk which he calls Airwalk, and it allows him to levitate in midair, though this is very similar to the description of Nana Shimura's float quirk, And it kind of makes you think, because he is the one that killed her, and you know, he was there when she died. So who knows, maybe this is the result of some experimentation or just straight up stealing her quirk. Who knows? All For One also recently stole the search quirk, which was taken from Ragdoll, and I think this one needs a bit more explaining than the others. Ragdoll said in the manga that she has to lay eyes on someone for this search quirk to activate, and once that happens, the data of that person is then stored inside the quirk forever, even when it's passed on to another person. For example, because she used search on Deku and a bunch of other UA students, All For One is now able to track those students down using the search quirk. Essentially, the power lets the user observe and monitor the location of up to 100 people at a time, and you can know their weaknesses on top of that. We see in the manga that people being monitored using this quirk almost look like shining stars in the distance, and when the user is looking for a specific quirk, the person with that power shines brighter than the others. The only thing we don't currently know is how far this power extends, like how far away can you search for someone. AFO also has a hypertrophy quirk, which increases the size of his arms. I mean, just look at how massive his hand is here. We see him use this in My Hero Academia Vigilantes to attack Knuckle Duster, and in the main anime, he combined it with a bunch of other abilities such as Bone Spear in a final attempt to kill All Might. So, with all that said, you're probably wondering who could possibly be in the #1 spot if a guy like AFO isn't, and believe me, I have good justification for the order of this ranking. Tomura Shigaraki is All For One's successor, and is the new possessor of the original All For One quirk. His body has been genetically modified to such an extent that Dr. Garaki referred to him as his masterpiece. Think about that. The creator of the higher Nomus, the USJ Nomu, and you know, obviously he would have tinkered around with All For One himself over the years. I mean, above all of that lies Shigaraki. There are two key reasons why I've ranked him above All For One. Firstly, his base strength is pretty comparable to All Might, and in chapter 274 this was shown when Shiggy started casually jumping around like the man himself. As far as we know, he has all the quirks that All For One had. You know, we've seen him use Air Cannon, we've seen him use Search, so it's fair to assume that all the other quirks I mentioned All For One having, Shigaraki also has those as well. His decay quirk is now capable of destroying entire cities with a single action, and his super regeneration power puts him just leagues above. The reason AFO looked like a potato is because he never had super regeneration. Shigaraki in his prime can already do that, making him essentially All For One but with a software upgrade. Secondly, we've seen in the manga that Shigaraki has inherited the instincts of All For One himself, so this means that he can easily combine quirks to suit his needs, such as when we saw him use Air Cannon in conjunction with radio waves in order to disable the hero's communication systems. Because All For One contain these instincts, I mean, the learning curve is not that steep, so again, at the very least he's equal to All For One, but in all likelihood, you know, over time, he will become even more proficient than the man himself. There's just too much going in Shigaraki's favour for him not to be ranked #1 on this list. But that is just my opinion. Let me know if you're on the same wavelength. I know some people might say, you know, we need more feats from Shigaraki, but I feel like, I mean, he's decayed 2 different cities at this point, and that's without even using all the tons of other quirks that he has. I just feel like Shiggy, he is #1, but let me know what you guys think. And if you want to see those 2 new episodes of My Hero Academia, be sure to head on over to crunchyroll.com/turtlequirk to get your 2-week free trial of Crunchyroll Premium. Peace out, guys.